final lecture of the day. Now we have a lecture on cyber threat emerging from remote working and working from home scenario. And we have with us Dr. Karnika Seth, who is a well-known cyber law expert. So I would just like to briefly introduce Dr. Karnika Seth. Dr. Karnika Seth is an internationally renowned cyber law, IP, and media law expert practicing in the Supreme Court of India. Her contribution to growth and development of cyber laws in India and internationally is widely acknowledged in the corporate world. She has been impaneled as a member of the working group at ICNN, formed to design the policy framework impacting global domain registration services, and has been on expert panel of UNICEF working on online safety. Dr. Seth has conferred the National Gaurav Award in 2017 for exemplary contribution to cyber laws. She received the Digital Empowerment Award in 2015 and the Law Day Award from the Chief Justice of India for her book, Protection on Children on Internet. She also received the Law Day Award in 2012 for her book, Computers, Internet, and New Technology Laws. So with this, I would like to now once again welcome Dr. Karnika Seth. Dr. Seth, over to you.
Thank you so much. I think it's always been a pleasure to speak at Wiki events, and this online training with NIDM on cyber threats is something that is a very pertinent issue. And we, during the pandemic and even before, we've seen the rising trends in cybercrime. And that's a fact that we are expecting almost a USD 6 trillion global economy loss due to cyber crimes in 2021. So very apt topic indeed, and I'm delighted to be here once again to take up this issue. I'd like to share a PPT. I'll just try and see if we can just use that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Monu, please, if you could, yeah.
Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Great. So the discussion today, in this online training program, I've seen different topics being covered, and my focus today is going to be mainly on what are the cyber threats we have faced in this country and otherwise globally in the WFH times, and what are the best practices, what we can basically utilize to safeguard our data, our people, and our processes and our organizations. This pandemic, though we see ups and downs right now, even we don't know how long the final normalcy will, ultimately culminate in our usual work environments, because we still find people working from home, and online is the new way of business. So therefore, more and more digitization, more and more online, communications, and threat to data. So that's what we are going to be talking about today. The rise in cybercrime, as I said, it has been huge, and 86% was the reported, last year also it was reported by the Home Ministry in India, that the cybercrime rose, and the kind of crimes which were percolating in cyberspace constituted not only just use of malware or ransomware, but fake sites. A lot of fake and phishing sites and links were floating on the net. And that played havoc, because people's anxieties were very high, and you would have seen that lots of people were also willing to donate monies, to safeguard different people, provide them medical aid and other resources. And those people were also duped, because those links and those sites and those accounts which they were sharing online were actually fake. So that's a fact that the law enforcement teams had a tough time curtailing and basically blocking these phishing links from the net. If you would have seen the phishing scams, the modus operandi of the criminals was not just only limited to using fake websites, basically links on social media, but also we would have seen a lot of phishing attacks, that is using of voice over IP. So a lot of voice over IP was used to call people or to SMS people, known as smishing. And that was being utilized by them as a tool or as a method to commit frauds. Fake mobile recharge scams, Netflix subscriptions, or even other kind of frauds percolated around this time. if you would have seen the NCRB data, the crime has doubled every year, every single year. And today's statistics, current statistics, if you see, one cybercrime attack is expected to actually take place every 11 seconds. Every 11 seconds is the today's statistics. So if you see that's huge. I mean, that's something that is calls for action, and that is the reason why we not only need to protect our companies, our data and manpower, but entire ecosystem needs a lot of checkpoints. And technology today, thankfully, we have progressed a lot in terms of AI, data science, and I've seen the presentation which is just happening before I started off. There is a lot which we have done in the country in terms of technology, and we are utilizing those tools and softwares to actually protect our systems and data, and that is the need of the hour. So needless to say, I mean, this slide will basically project what are the kinds of problems or threats, as we say, cyber threats, which we are facing. So we day-to-day, basis, we handle these cyber crimes, and from ransomware to malware attacks to QR code scams, fake news, then phishing, identity theft, cheating and money loss, scams, snooping, interceptions, and then I would say not this picture is not total picture. There's lots of threats to women and children during this time as well, and lots of cyberbullying in the online space. Women being target of a lot of harassment, and businesses' data has been basically stolen around this time. So that is the reason that we see a lot of man-in-the-middle attacks, and ransomware was the highest attacks which have been caused. Right from units like we reported, news from Haldiram to any other, I would say, entity, you name it, and there have been ransomware attacks, and there have been, latest attacks which we've seen as the Pegasus incident. There's a lot happening in this ecosystem at this point. So if we see during COVID time specifically, fake donation sites, phishing scams, as I said, malware attacks, and snooping through video conference apps, and fake news. These have been the main highlights. And by far, I think the rising trend has been more of ransomware, and the different kinds of ransomware also. Some encrypt the entire data out, and some encrypt only the specific data which is sensitive data. Some would encrypt the entire disk out, and the decryption may not be possible without having the password. So blackmail, sabotage, disruption of businesses has been the order of the day. Now, if we see fake donation sites, there have been many, and people were not aware initially where to we donate. So WHO had this particular site, the link which was on the WHO, Ministry of Health in India. Also, official website handles, they were to be, visited, and that kind of awareness was being then spread, after some scams were reported. And PM Relief Fund itself, there was a scam of the same, and the account of, if you see PM Cares Relief Fund, there were fake UPI handles which were found, and then they were blocked, from access. So Delhi police registered a complaint, and that was investigated. So therefore, the problems which occurred were basically because of lack of awareness among people also, and the frantic clicking of links just to get access to some information and the latest statistics of what is the current score of patients of COVID and other things, and therefore the need for the government app. So Arogya Setu app was launched during this time. Advisories were given by the Delhi police, and lots of fake astrologers, lots of fake therapists floating on the online. So there was a lot of need for awareness, and that's why many phishing sites were blocked by the ministry, and many white papers were produced by the certain, and the government authorities warned people, right from WHO to I would say Indian authorities. There were a clear dissemination of what are those fake links, and they have been blocked, and basically best practices given to people to actually stop using these phishing links and circulating them without checking. So this particular site, this Ministry of Health, had various resources, and those were reliable. So therefore, it was increasingly spread in the media that you need to visit these to get the right information, because there was a lot of fake information. And even Supreme Court of India was very concerned over the fake news during COVID. So there were clear directives given by the court to actually curb fake news and go for only reliable information. Now this brings me to letting you know that basically there's also technical tools. There are lots of them available to detect fake news. Apart from encouraging people to look at only official handles of news channels or papers, there are various softwares and various factcheck.org, Boom, MetaFact, which allow you to actually check the fake news from real. And morphed pictures, you can detect morphed pictures, you can detect whether these are doctored or these are deep fakes or not. And that is possible. There are other tools, Google reverse image search and Hoaxlayer, that is another service which we saw. And the newspaper handles, they themselves have fact-checking sites. So that has been a boon to actually curb fake news in India. Then there were some new launches, like Truth Share was a new technology to actually find out whether there is any particular news which is fake or not from genuine. And these models very, very I think they're very sophisticated, and one is able to find out whether this particular tampering has occurred in this particular piece of news or not, whether it's video, audio, or it's textual. Then Certain also issued various advisories from time to time, and from the Zoom to other protocols and security aspects. Certain did their own share of advisories, and there were many of them available. And once you go through the vulnerabilities, they advised on various Google Android or otherwise, Apple Mac also. They had certain vulnerabilities pointed out to people, and various advisories on online safety were given during this time, both for mobile devices and other applications. And after that, if you see the secure usage of Zoom, as I mentioned, was also 30th March advisory, and later on there were updates in the Zoom, and that worked well. Thereafter, there have been organizations in India like the DSCI, which have given various white papers and mandates during this time also, COVID-19 advisories, which were helpful. And social media giants themselves had various measures, like the forwarding of this links by WhatsApp was curtailed to 5 forwards. So they have their own due diligence mechanisms installed, and various campaigns took place during this time. So given this landscape, what happened during the last 2 years in India and abroad during pandemic? The threats have been there. There have been resilient measures to catch up with and actually safeguard yourselves and organizations from these threats. Various stakeholders have done their share. But when it comes to best practices, if I have to cull out all the best practices, what one needs to do, then for your businesses, these are certain tips which have been there in the number of presentations which we've delivered last 2 years. I think more than 50 presentations on the same topic have been delivered by us. And if I just cull out those important aspects, then these are the few of them, like using a robust Wi-Fi, because many of them did not even use WPA 2 or 3. Turning the Wi-Fi off when not in use, Bluetooth as well, keeping the OS application software up to date, because a lot of times people don't patch up, and see the updates. Then deploying the right antiviruses, anti-spywares, and whenever one click or forward a content, if one is not watchful, obviously that could be a phishing link and land you in trouble. And then reading the terms of service. Many organizations encourage use of good practices, and we have during this time done the WFH's policy also, social media policy, internet use policy, for organizations, and especially the work from home policies, because there was a need. A lot of the in organizations, people were actually using their own home devices to use for work purposes, which was causing problem in terms of data and in terms of the protocols of communication and other work related, I would say, rules and violation of the same. So therefore, there was a need for having the right, gadgets, what one can use, the right allocation of software, and the protocols to be followed. So the WFH policy became a very, very paramount document for any organization. Then digital signatures, giving out digital signatures, using the digital signatures, having two-factor authentications, OTP mechanisms, and payment to be only made on HTTPS sites, registering for bank alerts, not falling prey to QR code scams, and not falling prey to smishing and phishing calls were some of the key highlights of best practices which one has shared during this time. If we also look at the use of tools, then the highest I would say adoption was there of VPNs, virtual private networks, which allow you to actually conceal your real IPs and safeguard your systems and basically data from any kind of attacks. So you would use a VPN. A DLP would help preventing a data loss, so that the data is not siphoned off elsewhere by an attacker or otherwise. Even the employees have been diligent to understand the relevance of the same and importance of data loss prevention software. Most of the internet use policies also highlighted that the organizations are using this DLP to check what data the employees are forwarding, and they're not allowed to forward official data onto any of their personal email accounts specifically. So we've dealt with a lot of cases where a lot of employees don't say follow this particular mandate and transfer the same to their personal email IDs, and that lands them in a problem, because if that contains some sensitive information or confidential information of any organization, the organization has a right to actually conduct surveillance and take gadgets for screening, and then take any legal action or recourse. So it's always better to have the internet use policy very clearly laid down and signed by the employees, and so that they understand the nuances and what fallouts can be there of any kind of breaches, intentional or otherwise. So that's something which was very, very important. And then crisis management incident response plans were to be basically made, especially by the remote workforce. So the people who are working from home specifically, how do they manage any incident? What is the protocol? Who to report to? How do we safeguard the electronic evidence? What are the requirements? Because in the practice, in legal practice, we use the electronic evidence to pursue any case. So if it's a cybercrime case, those electronic evidences are collected and preserved in the best possible manner, like you've seen in the cyber forensics lecture, that there was a right blocker used, because we don't want any kind of tampering of the electronic evidence, and that is usually filed along with section 65B Evidence Act certificate by the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer of the company, to say that this incident has occurred, and this is the printout from the original device that is had this particular evidence in it. And during the time when this incident happened, this system was working fine and properly. So there are certain prerequisites under that section 65B of the Evidence Act which are required to be produced. And it's therefore important to give the right guidance to the employees on crisis management and incident response plans, so that they don't themselves unintentionally or inadvertently tamper the data or the screenshots which are relevant to pursue any legal action. Then comes your periodic audits of system and security and data. Definitely those are very essential. And then regular backups of data, and then emergency incident response. So these are some key best practices for resilience in this WFH times, which have proven very helpful, specifically if you have a regular backup of data. So even if there's a ransomware attack, the backup has been helpful in, at least safeguarding the business so that it's not disrupted completely. So it's always advisable to do that. And a lot of companies have, encouraged use of passwords, pattern managers, and built-in encryption mechanisms which are there in the devices. They have been encouraged to be used. And awareness and training is something that goes without saying is very important. And that is the reason why there was so quick an adoption, because the awareness training was something which was imperative and was being given by people. The organizations wanted to safeguard and train their workforces. And during this security awareness trainings, all these best practices were understood and utilized, and plan of action was made by them to plug in all the loopholes. So how the VPN would work, for instance, this slide shows the same. And during those security awareness trainings, all these are very well explained. How at various levels from endpoint to, generally at a server level or otherwise, attacks could happen, and how one can plug those, attacks. How the VPN works is something which is very clear from this, example. And the user device and the VPN client interact together, and then there would be a connection after encryption with this service provider, and further you go onto the internet. So your original identity gets concealed, and that is just a safeguard which is very useful. And it helps in basically curtailing any kind of, or preventing any kind of cybercrime attacks. The DLP, on the other hand, is something which will protect the data from any kind of, for example, any emails which are going through. Any alerts will be sent if there's any email which is not, something which is not authorized data to be sent out to somebody. There would be an alert sent, and then the teams who are, vigilant teams who are actually working on it will take the necessary action, based on the flags which are given on the same. Then if we see the storage, endpoint, and network, these are three key tanks that go into the management of the DLP software. This basically shows if there's a endpoint security threat. There are good softwares, many of them like Symantec, we have McAfee also, and there are network security checks also in the DLP. So in the network, if the data is being lost by any means, or during storage, if there is any kind of a leakage or any kind of threat, so that is pointed out. So it's at 3 levels. And that is the useful part, because it's not just at one level, but one can actually look at it from all the 3 levels and prevent loss of any kind of data, which is crucial to any company. Now, the adoption of cloud is something that goes without saying. It's part and parcel of our businesses today. Whether it's private or public or hybrid, you may choose any, but various security levels are important. Again, network security, workload security, or I would say file storage security. So at various levels, you would have seen, excuse me, that the cloud is something that people would rely on, and this is something that is now the order of the day. So, sorry. I would straight away, stress on this part that in the cloud, people preferring private cloud to public cloud. The reason is obviously security parameters, because when it comes to private cloud, you have a complete control. You have a complete control on what is the parameters you'd like to put in place. Whereas if you're sharing it with the different resources, like if there is SaaS, software as a service, or if you're using resources for multiple organizations, there could be a security threat. However, a lot of organizations also have chosen hybrid cloud models because they're costly to have a private cloud for all the cases. Therefore, I think it's a choice the organization really needs to make, whether it would like to go for private or public or hybrid cloud. But it also depends on the data and the kind of sensitivity which is involved and the processes. It is ultimately a choice which one needs to make in terms of security, in terms of applications, in terms of storage and network security, how they would be comfortable in using a particular service, private or public or hybrid. So that's really dependent on the nature of data, the processes, and the comfort levels of the protocols that they sign with the service provider as well. Now, this brings me to the 16 steps, because when we see the 16 steps to see the IT secure or not, this slide particularly I find very useful because it basically captures in a one screenshot where are the various threats, and how we need to transgress, or rather travel through in terms of cyber safety and security in this domain, because it's not just one or two checkpoints or three checkpoints. There are several checkpoints in terms of cyber security one needs to match up in order to feel confident that this is now foolproof security, although there's no 100% guarantee. Even the best of organizations with best of technology, manpower, training, and resources are not able to sometimes avert attacks. So if we see this particular slide, we have the web hosting domain name management angle, then we have email security systems, then also use of multi-factor authentication, email security filtering encryption mechanisms, then your Office or OS that you use, then your gateway security, any kind of firewalls you'd like to put, malware protection mechanisms, and then other local security mechanisms, user access controls, and endpoint security mechanisms, antiviruses, anti-spywares, advanced threat analytics, any kind of monitoring, audits to see if there are any attacks which are possible. Just do a sort of end-to-end encryption of data and devices, use of these kind of technologies, and then mobile device and management remote by internal IT networks, security policies and practices so that the policy documentation is in order, then user training, and again, vulnerability scanning and testing. And in the end, we know that the whole world is changing in terms of privacy protection and other right mechanisms. Right to be forgotten is now a new right. So a lot of things we have seen in terms of GDPR compliance in the Europe, and also Indian businesses get affected because a lot of Indian businesses cater to European clients and they ought to abide by GDPR guidelines. So we also see a lot of work on this front, and we have managed a lot of GDPR compliance documents wherein we have to see whether the agreement which is being entered into with a back office operator, for example, in India, who processes data of Europeans, needs to be GDPR compliant, whether those practices are put in place, whether the technology is foolproof in that order, and backup and disaster recovery are some of the other aspects. But whether all the requirements of network security and GDPR are in order or not becomes a crucial question at that point. So having said that, there are about almost 16 checkpoints given in this, but they are definitely more than what is encapsulated here, because there are phishing attacks and there are a lot of ransomware attacks, and most of them happen to be not because the technology was not in place. Most of them happen because there were social engineering attacks, and criminals know how to manipulate through social use of social media, or through use of any interesting video or a link sent to somebody, how to manipulate and ask the sensitive information, whether it's financial data or other data from individuals or organizations, and then they commit frauds. That's how it is. And no matter how much technology we may infuse in our systems and processes and our documentation is in order, the human part of training is very crucial. And that's something that needs, I think, if not more, equal attention than just deploying the gadgets and technology and resources to safeguard our organizations. So during WFH, we see a lot of this trend. Companies have geared up to, I would say, overall their systems, not only compliance measures in terms of policies, in terms of manpower training and deployment of technology. All three are very important. So we have various resources on our website. You can go through the same, and there are apps also available on the various app stores. And you can see many other resources, on the DSCI or the MIT site, and there have been also various advisories by CERT, as I mentioned. Apart from that, it's also important to see the IT Act. I think I didn't specifically mention this, it will be too legal jargon, but I think it's important to highlight this slide because a lot of these hacking attempts go under Section 66 of the IT Act. And this punishment is about 3 years of any kind of attacks, unauthorized interception of any data, unauthorizedly downloading any data, and identity theft is again 66C of the IT Act. Then the cheating by personation, again 3 years of punishment and fine. 66F is by far largest because any kind of cyber terrorist attack especially has a punishment of up to life imprisonment and fine. And then we have, IPC provisions like cheating and various other sections which may apply, from time to time. But in most ransomware and other attack cases, the main section used is Section 66 or Edwards 43 of the IT Act. And there one needs to prove the hacking has taken place. So we normally use cyber forensics techniques to actually cull out the relevant data, produce it as electronic evidence along with the case action. Criminal action is filed, and if it is a defamatory matter, defamation involved or data loss is also there, one can also move before the adjudicating officer of the, I would say, 46 section of the IT Act allows you to claim compensation if the data has not been kept secure, maybe by a body corporate who is collecting your data, a service provider who has not managed to keep the data safe, like the credit card details. Latest mandate by the RBI that the credit card details should not be there on the servers of these companies is important because ultimately all these attacks take away this financial information cost loss to people. And when the loss is caused to people, they are unable to sometimes prove that this has happened because of the security lapses on the part of the service providers to safeguard their information. And that onus, that is huge burden because any complainant cannot prove the same. That becomes a challenge, but nevertheless, they have now, RBI has also made clear directives that if something like this happens where the fault is not on the part of the consumer, then he can sue. For example, if it's a bank where unauthorized debits have taken place in a customer's account, he can sue the bank for any kind of breach of reasonable security practices it ought to have kept. So that is one interesting part. And apart from that, there is a zero trust infrastructure, which is built by now organizations, and it's becoming stricter. The norms are becoming stricter of what kind of security parameters have to be kept by organizations to safeguard, people's data if they're collecting people's data. So for this, these provisions become important. And in many cases, blocking is possible if there is any kind of data which is IP sensitive and it has been leaked online, for instance, a database of customers or otherwise. These are all copyright protected. They're all sensitive information. one can claim injunction from the court to actually stop this data from being, on the net, and blocking orders can be passed, or injunction orders can be passed. And the trend is now also to protect privacy of people. So the Justice K.S. Puttaswamy case, 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court has very clearly held that data privacy is important and fundamental right of people, and therefore they have to be protected in terms of whatever is their confidential private data, and explicit consent needs to be taken from them in order to take any kind of such data which is sensitive. So it becomes important to preserve screenshots of evidence whenever there are any kind of cyber crimes which take place, reporting it to bank immediately if it's a financial fraud, blocking the relevant credit cards or debit cards. And if a bank server is hacked, as I said, then there is zero liability for the customer. Or at least when he reports the fraud on immediate basis, then he's protected. Registering the police complaint, normally cybercrime.gov.in is the site where one can register online complaints, and that's possible even in the WFH environment. There have been many cases reported during this time, and emergency helplines are also there. So now, given this spectrum of how cybercrimes have percolated in this time, and what other kinds of threats we have seen, and real life cases, if you ask me, there have been many. Specifically, man-in-the-middle attacks, where export and import, there was one case where there was an export and import organization. There was a man-in-the-middle attack where somebody hacked into their systems, was somebody an ex-employee, and that created fake IDs of people who were managing the accounts of these two divisions, and the monies was siphoned away because the fake bank account details were supplanted in the invoice which was being circulated using fake email IDs. So that's a very common scenario, and lots of QR code scams where the QR code would say that a person would say, okay, accept say 25,000 rupees from an X person, and the person would think that he would be paid the same, whereas there would be a debit of the same. So a lot of the QR code scams also happened, and data thefts. Definitely a lot of data thefts due to phishing attacks happened in this time frame. So having said that, I think we are almost on the verge of the final timings, but I would like to take up any questions rather at this point, if possible. But I think if there are any active questions on the chat window, maybe we can take those. In the meantime, I just want to wind up this by showing you the cybercrime.gov.in portal. You can actually look at this portal. It allows you to register complaints by the click of a mouse. You can just register whatever complaints they may be. And security by design is what is the order of the day. I feel that we used to talk about privacy by design initially, but now I think the time has come where we should be actually talking about, this is security by design. Right now, we just cannot afford security, overlooking security anymore. And that's something which is crucial for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Karnika Seth, for the detailed presentation which you presented right now, and giving us a perspective on different kind of challenges which generally people face during work from home scenario, and threats coming from the cyberspace. So there are two questions which I am seeing right now in the question box. One is that what are the this is from Mr. Sachin Patil. He's asking that what are the credentials mandatory for expert or a forensic witness to be admissible on cyber forensic topic under the Indian Evidence Act or maybe Indian IT Act?
What are the
credentials? He's asking what kind of credentials which are mandatory for maybe for an expert or forensic witness to be admissible on cyber forensic topic under the Indian Evidence Act or Indian IT Act.
Okay, so whenever there is any kind of electronic evidence, generally what a party does is either they produce the evidence themselves. That could be an the actual device itself. It could be a primary piece of evidence. We follow the best evidence rule in India. So either we give that gadget, and that is the evidence, or one could take a printout of the particular screenshot or an email or otherwise, and file it along with the Section 65B certificate. That will be the chief technology officer of the company who would sign the same and say that this is from that system, and you are not able to obviously produce the entire system because of maybe other documents which are confidential, or it's in the server or otherwise, and then you're giving this particular thing. As regards forensic services, if you're taking the help of a particular forensic like a qualified forensic expert, then what he needs to describe is that he has imaged the data and given it in the port by deploying which processes, what software has been used, which hash mechanism has been used. That needs to be there, and obviously he needs to be a certified forensic expert, a qualified forensic expert. And the EEE is an organization like a officer, examiner of electronic evidence under the IT Act, is the body which there have been certain cyber labs which have been notified by the government of India to act as EEE, where they would be having a final say on the evidence, whether this is actually genuine, authentic or not. So it's like an expert witness. So when there is a controversy, or there is a conflict or dispute for a particular piece of evidence, whether this is credible or not, the EEE gives a final say. It's like calling an expert witness in the court of law, and he deposes there. So ultimately there are two things. One is the admissibility part, which is to prove that this evidence is admissible or not in a court of law, which will require either a primary piece of evidence to be filed, or a secondary evidence needs to be proven through this certificate which is to be filed. Or and then comes the weightage of the evidence, and to prove that is something where the expert witness would come, or a witness would be examined on the same. So that is a second part of proving an electronic evidence.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So another question goes to an example. Mr. Nikhil is asking, ma'am, is in a case where a video chip of an interview given by a business house explaining the services they offer on TV is used by a competitor without the original business house permission, is it an IPR infringement or just any other crime?
If a video chip is like a video has been used.
It's a video clip basically. Sorry, not chip. It's a video clip of an interview given by a business house explaining their services on TV, and it is taken by a competitor and without the permission of the original business house. They so
Okay.
it is an IPR infringement or any other kind of a crime?
Yeah, it is definitely IPR infringement. One needs to understand this falls under copyright law, and there is a violation there. I mean, that can be, injunction can be claimed, and damages can be claimed for the same. But if one is able to prove that it was stolen from their systems, then it also becomes hacking. It really depends on the facts, how this particular video really reached them. If it was already in the public domain on say internet, then it will just be a copyright infringement. But if it was not available otherwise, and it was stolen from their systems, it would also be a hacking case. So that really depends on the facts of every case.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Rohit Raman is asking, do you see enactment of a law in near future which mandates every organization to have a robust cybersecurity policy and architecture? Usually people are more reactive than being proactive. So isn't it really a high time that a person responsible should be bound to protect the data and information? So basically the question is about the law. Is it coming in near future or?
Yeah, it's our safety actually lies in our own hands. Just like people used to keep their checkbooks very carefully in the earlier times, we need to keep our passwords very carefully now. and have our policies in place so that we have clear directions and mandates and guidelines for our employees, and how they need to use information and protect the data of companies. So even in the current regime, IT Act, the mandate for protecting financial data like credit card information or otherwise is on the person whose account it relates to. So if it's a consumer, he is in charge of the same. Similarly, if you're an organization who's handling people's data, for example, or even your own organization, your own sensitive data, the safety lies in your own hands, that like that. So under section 43A, companies who collect other people's data, they are anyway supposed to keep their data safe. Otherwise, they will be sued for compensation and other, remedies. As regards your own data, you have to prevent loss. So that is something that the law says you need to keep your password secure. Any kind of, policy measures, organizations need to keep that in order, because under Section 85 of the IT Act, the director's liability is there, deemed liability of directors. So unless they maintain due diligence practices, they avoid negligence, and they are proactive, they will not be able to prove that they have taken adequate measures and monitoring measures to safeguard people and their organization, and their data. So there is deemed liability of directors, so one has to be vigilant, and therefore one of the good practices is to have right policy measures in their organization.
Thank you, ma'am. In favor of time, I would take this last question, ma'am. So Mr. Samir is asking, how do we address data sovereignty issue with cloud platform? Does MHA approved cloud providers? I think he wants to ask, is there any list of providers which MHA provides, or anybody else who authenticates some list of providers?
I didn't get your last part of your question. If you could repeat that.
Yeah, so he's asking that how do we address data sovereignty issue with cloud platforms? Is there any credible list of cloud service providers which is given by maybe some government agency, approved by some government agency?
Well, I don't think we can, just recommend names. It will be unfair because there are lots of good providers. But you can look at the amount of information which is available, and there are white papers given by the government. I don't think they endorse any particular softwares. So it's up to you to actually judge whether this is a right service to take or not. I would say that there are some good service providers available, and I don't think maybe the safety manuals that the government comes out with would have certain names and measures, and some indigenous, some our own government might be also. CDAC does a lot of good softwares also, may be helpful, but I cannot say that only 5 names out of say 10 of them would be the right practice to take.
Even the government cannot provide this names.
That will be unfair. That will be unfair as a competition. Yeah.
Yeah, they can issue a list, maybe some guidelines to check what can be.
Yes, certainly that may be possible, but I don't think we can just say 5 names and say, okay, these are the only right players. So do that.
Thank you.
I do want to mention one more thing. If somebody is interested in electronic evidence and understanding this better, there's this latest judgment of Arjun Pandit Rao case, which has considered Anwar versus Bashir case and the Shafi Muhammad case. Very interestingly, and they can look up this Arjun Pandit Rao case. There have been certain interesting exceptions called out where certificate may not be even necessary to be produced, where a person has tried enough to get the certificate from a third party, but the third party doesn't, produce the same. So that can be explored more through the Arjun Pandit Rao case, if anybody wants to read it up. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for this detailed explanation on this question. And with this, we come to the conclusion of the 3 days training program. And ma'am, I would like to thank you on behalf of FICCI and NIDM both for joining us as a speaker. And just to give a formal vote of thanks, I have with me here Mr. Sumit Gupta, Assistant Secretary General FICCI, to deliver vote of thanks. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Seth. I heard most of your session, and as always, it was quite informative and very interesting. Thanks for your time and efforts.
Thank you.
In fact, I would like to take this opportunity to thank ED, NIDM, Professor Anil Gupta, and Mr. Michael Islery for their support and making this program happen with us. And as always, thanks for the opportunity given to FICCI to partner with NIDM and do this particular workshop on a very, very important topic on cyber crime and cyber threat. And I believe during the course of 3 days, we had a lot of interesting topics which we discussed, and there was a lot of takeaways for me personally, and I'm sure a lot of our participants would have definitely benefited out of it. And going forward, we would be conducting many more such workshops, and specifically the topic of cyber is such that the more you do, I mean, it's always not enough, because the threat is so much and there is so much to understand and learn about this. So going forward, we would be further scheduling other programs, be it webinar or the workshop on this particular aspect as well. And I thank all the faculty members for their time and the effort they took and the presentations they made. So on behalf of FICCI and NIDF, I thank all the participants, and I believe all the participants would be receiving the training certificates for which my colleague Gaurav would have already announced. And there's an 80% of mandatory attendance, which is a requirement for the attendance for the certificate. So with these words, I thank you all and look forward to your continued support. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, sir, for this nice vote of thanks. So before closing, I would like to see if any advice or last words from maybe from Sanjeev or Mr. Michael to the participants. For participants, any advisory which you would like to share?
Michael, you may announce about the process of getting the certificate.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, Michael.
Yeah.
Yes. So the participants can log in. The way they log in for the registration, they can find a certificate from the NIDM portal itself, and it will be available maybe in the next three days. I cannot assure you by tomorrow or something. Maybe in the next 3 days, it will be made available from the portal. So once the certificate is ready, you'll receive an email from there. You can log in and then you can download from the portal itself. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for sharing this information. So I believe all the participants must have benefited out of the 3 days deliberation. We have experts and well-known speakers in the cyber domain with us. So thank you all for attending this session, and we will come up with more such sessions with support of NIDM in near future. With these words, I would like to thank you again once again, and would like to close this session with your permission. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thanks a lot. Thanks
Michael.
I can see Captain Louis also.
Captain Louis is still there, so thank you, Captain Louis.
Yeah.
For being with us for the entire day almost. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. It was really nice having you. Thanks.
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 Bye.